Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take that mountain of information, all your sources, your notes, your research, and we try to turn it into a clear, navigable path right to the core of what you really need to know. And today, we are tackling something that I think a lot of us feel is just fundamentally broken in the modern world, and that's our ability for sustained focus.
Feels like it's gone.
It really does. I mean, we are living in this era of just relentless noise. You've got pings, notifications, constant chatter, and this ever-present cultural pressure to be multitasking all the time.
Always on.
Always on. And for so many of us, getting to that place of true deep focus feels like trying to, grasp smoke.
Yeah.
And the usual advice is just, work harder, grit your teeth, power through it.
Right. More effort, more willpower.
Exactly. But our deep dive today suggests something profoundly, and I think beautifully different. This session is a kind of shortcut to reclaiming that clarity, not through more effort, but through more presence. Our mission today is to explore this idea that the secret to sustained focus and to, genuine inner calm, it isn't about doubling down on sheer will. It's about transforming how we engage with the world of sound.
It's a fundamental shift in approach.
Yeah.
We're diving into this idea that deeply attentive, peaceful listening, that is the foundational practice. That's what you need to cultivate clarity and to really sharpen your mind.
It's more than just hearing things.
Oh, it's way beyond just hearing. It's about cultivating pure presence, in every single moment.
And that's the key connection we want to make for you, the listener. If you're struggling with information overload, if you feel like your mind is just constantly pulled in 1,000 different directions.
Which is most of us.
I think it's all of us, right? We're offering some accessible, actionable knowledge to help you stabilize your mind, to recharge your spirit, and this is the best part, without adding a single crushing item to your already massive to-do list.
And this really gets to the core premise of all the material we looked at. True listening. It's described not just as, hearing and processing sounds, but as a rare art.
A rare art. I like that.
It's rare because our modern life, it prioritizes speed and volume over reception and stillness. This kind of listening has to be presence-driven and what the research calls full-bodied.
Full-bodied. What does that mean in this context?
It means engaging your entire being. Your memory, your emotional centers, even your physical body, not just your ears. It's about fully receiving the input. And when you commit to practicing this rare art, you begin to anchor yourself, firmly and consistently in the present moment.
And that's the foundation for focus.
It's the absolute necessary prerequisite for achieving any kind of sustained focus. You can't have one without the other.
Okay, so let's unpack this with some of the hard science. If focus is our goal, what is actually happening in the brain? In the neural pathways when we genuinely listen, when we lean in with intention versus when we just sort of hear background noise.
Right. Or treat sound as just disposable input. What's absolutely fascinating here is the sheer difference that intentionality makes in how your brain functions.
Okay.
Attentive listening, it's so much more than just stimulating the auditory cortex. It triggers this comprehensive, almost immediate shift in your brain's activity. The neuroscience points to really compelling evidence, showing that when we listen with real presence, the brain shifts dramatically from what researchers call scattered activity.
Which sounds like my brain most of the time.
Yes, mine too. Scattered activity to a much more harmonious and efficient state. And they call this integrated function.
Integrated function. That sounds, like maximum efficiency. But how is that different from how we normally process sound? What does that integration actually look like on a measurable level?
It looks like this complex, synchronized dance across several really critical, high-level brain regions that, they usually operate kind of semi-independently.
So they start working together?
Perfectly put. When you are truly focused on listening, the regions responsible for your executive function. So we're talking about advanced planning, complex decision-making, and most importantly, impulse control.
Right.
They synchronize powerfully with the areas that govern long-term memory and, crucially, emotion regulation.
Okay, hold on. So if I'm, say, struggling to follow a complex presentation at work and I just decide to dedicate my full attention to the sounds, to the speaker's voice, I'm actually engaging my planning and my emotional management systems at the same time.
That is precisely the synergy that creates clarity. When the information is processed by these integrated systems, you're not just passively, recording data points.
You're doing more.
You're linking that new information to your existing knowledge base in a really structured way, and you are managing the associated emotional load, the stress, the confusion, the frustration of not getting it.
Yeah.
You're managing all that simultaneously. This synchronization prevents your cognitive system from getting overwhelmed.
So the overall quality of my thinking, my cognitive output, it's not just about my IQ or how much effort I'm putting in. It's about the efficiency of this neurological integration.
That's it. That affirms the finding that the practical outcome is dramatically improved recall. Information that's processed across these integrated systems, it just sticks better. It's more accessible later on.
Okay.
But there's another critical benefit: enhanced creative thinking.
How does that work?
Well, engaging your whole self in this, non-reactive active listening, it allows for deeper connections. You start to see links between seemingly disparate concepts that you would have missed before. This ability to spot novel relationships, that's the real engine of creativity.
Right.
When your emotion regulation centers are calmly engaged, you can approach complex problems with less stress, less cognitive rigidity, and just far more clarity. And that often leads directly to those breakthrough insights.
And the sources really hammered home this idea of listening as a profound, practical form of mindfulness. So if I'm just generally overwhelmed, my mind is racing. What does intentional listening offer me in terms of, grounding?
Listening becomes mindfulness in action. The sound itself, whether it's the hum of your refrigerator, the complexity of a piece of music, a conversation, the wind outside, it acts as a consistent, immediate anchor.
An anchor.
Exactly. Mindful listening roots us firmly, consistently, and without judgment, right in the present moment. Our brains, by default, they're relentless time travelers.
Yes, they are.
We spend so much energy dwelling on regrets, mistakes, arguments from the past, what psychologists call rumination. Or we project into the future, cycling through all these anxiety-inducing scenarios about tomorrow's deadline or next year's challenges.
That mental time machine is exhausting.
It's massively energy depleting. So by intentionally focusing on your immediate acoustic environment, you are actively and gently pulling your mind away from those corrosive cycles of rumination and anxiety. This process forms the necessary, stable foundation for sustained focus.
So you can't really focus on a hard task.
You simply cannot focus deeply on a cognitively demanding task if, say, 80% of your mental energy is tied up in yesterday's perceived failure or tomorrow's looming stress. Listening brings the mind home. It brings it to the present, which is where the work gets done.
So we know how to focus, but here's the unavoidable question, right? Why is it so acutely difficult today? It feels like it's more than just the external noise, is how our, inherent programming responds to all that volume. And the fact that we often celebrate the wrong cognitive habits.
We celebrate those habits because we've all bought into a truly pervasive and frankly destructive cultural misconception: the myth of multitasking.
The myth of multitasking.
The material we reviewed, it addresses this directly and just debunks it thoroughly. The reality, which is supported by decades of cognitive studies, is that humans are physiologically inherently poor multitaskers, at least when it comes to any task that requires deep concentration.
So we're not running parallel processes like a computer. We're just performing these rapid, costly shifts.
Precisely. The brain does not truly work on two cognitively complex tasks simultaneously. It performs rapid, highly inefficient switching between them. It's a process called context switching.
Context switching.
And the sources make it very clear that the consequences of this switching are far more costly, measurable, and damaging than most of us realize. Firstly, there's this massive metabolic depletion of mental energy every single time the brain has to reorient itself.
Wow.
It has to retrieve the previous task's parameters, discard the current one's information. It's like turning a massive machine on and off every 5 seconds.
That internal friction must translate to a measurable drop in performance.
It does. Secondly, there's a quantifiable reduction in comprehension, and your error rates climb significantly. That's because the brain never fully commits its resources to encoding the information from either task.
So you end up reading an email while you're half listening to a meeting.
And you retain zero of the critical details from both.
Okay, but I have to introduce the skeptical counterpoint here. I mean, my company, many companies, they actively praise and promote the people who can juggle 10 things at once. If I stop multitasking and I insist on deep, single task work, that deep work approach, one, I just look lazy. How do you justify this in a culture that demands constant visible activity?
That is the essential conflict of the modern knowledge worker. It really is. And the research provides the justification. You need to frame deep listening and single task focus not as laziness, but as a commitment to quality and long-term sustainability. The multitasking worker produces a high volume of fragmented attention. and they suffer burnout much more rapidly. The focused listener, by contrast, minimizes that context switching and uses their mental energy efficiently. They produce higher quality output, faster, and with less long-term stress.
So you trade the appearance of being busy for actually being effective.
You're trading performative busyness for actual measurable effectiveness. You achieve the higher level task, the truly important strategic task, with far less strain.
That validates the idea. We're fragmenting our attention, which leaves us perpetually feeling busy, behind, and ultimately ineffective.
Absolutely. And this is all compounded by the sheer volume of sensory overload we endure every day. It's not just the external inputs, the emails, the meetings, the social media. We often forget that even when the external noise stops, the inner noise immediately takes over.
That internal chatter, the endless self-criticism, the planning loop, the what-ifs, that is often the loudest input we receive all day.
It generates its own form of high-frequency overload.
Yeah.
And this constant bombardment, both internal and external, it forces our nervous system into a low-grade, persistent state of stress.
You mean that fight-or-flight mode?
Think of it as being stuck in a subtle fight-or-flight mode, yes. The sympathetic nervous system is perpetually activated. And when this happens, our higher cognitive functions, our prefrontal cortex functions, which are responsible for that sustained, high-level focus, they're dramatically impaired. This stress state essentially dims our natural innate ability for deep focus.
Because the body is prioritizing survival over thinking.
That's it. We're biologically designed to pay deep, stable attention only when we feel safe and calm, which, modern life rarely allows for.
Okay, so if our current state is defined by this chaos and chronic overload, we need a calm center to move forward from, and a structured way to build it. The sources give us a clear roadmap for this. So what are the fundamentals, the core elements we have to consciously adopt to build a peaceful listening practice?
The foundation of this whole transformation is what's called intentional attention. It's so much more profound than just turning off the TV or finding a quiet library.
Yeah.
We have to cultivate a calm center within ourselves, regardless of the ambient environment.
Okay.
And the research describes 3 essential pillars that you really have to adopt simultaneously to support this practice.
Let's spend some time defining the first one, intention. How is this different from just deciding to listen?
Intention is the conscious, almost ritualistic decision to truly listen. We spend most of our day approaching sound passively. We're just waiting for it to happen to us.
Right.
Intentional listening means deciding up front, for the next 7 minutes, my only goal is not to process this for a task, but simply to listen to it as a sensation. This proactive commitment is key, whether you're listening to complex music, the sounds of nature, another person, or critically, even your own inner thoughts.
So you're giving your mind a job.
You're setting a specific limited stage for focused presence before the sound even registers. It prevents the mind from just wandering aimlessly.
And the second pillar is attention. This feels like where the heavy lifting and the real mental training happens. This is where the mind pushes back.
Absolutely. Attention involves directing the full beam of your focus wholly and exclusively to the present sound or sensation. This is the practice. Because your mind is conditioned to wander, to generate new stimuli, you will notice thoughts arising, distracting you.
And the goal isn't to stop them.
No. The sources stress that the practice is fundamentally not about stopping those thoughts. That's a battle you can't win. The real practice is about gently noticing the wandering, acknowledging the thought, maybe labeling it, planning or worry, without judgment or self-recrimination.
And then just come back to the sound.
And then you gently, patiently return your full focus back to the object of attention, the sound. Each and every one of those returns is a small, powerful act of strengthening that neurological focus muscle.
Okay, the third pillar seems like it might be the most critical for inner calm. Non-judgment. This is particularly challenging when we're listening to something we find irritating, like traffic, or when we're receiving criticism.
Non-judgment is indeed the deepest, most powerful layer, because it addresses the root cause of our mental energy depletion. We have this pervasive, almost instant tendency to label and evaluate everything we encounter. That music is boring, that traffic noise is annoying, that person's idea is wrong.
Or my own self-talk is inadequate.
Precisely. This instant labeling is what drains our cognitive resources.
Can you elaborate on that? How does just labeling something boring drain my energy?
Well, when you label something boring, your executive function now has to spend energy justifying that label. And then it has to decide what to do next. Should I change the music? Should I mentally check out of this conversation? This decision-making loop is constant processing, which requires energy.
I see.
Non-judgmental listening requires allowing sounds or ideas or feelings to simply be what they are, without immediately applying that evaluative label, good, bad, boring, important. You're observing the fact of the sound or the thought rather than reacting to its content. And this radically reduces the amount of secondary mental processing you have to do, which frees up vast resources for genuine, non-reactive focus.
So that's the mental framework: intention, attention, non-judgment. But while the core practice is internal, the physical environment must play a supporting role. What are the practical steps for laying a foundation that supports this deep mental work?
Well, while an advanced practitioner might be able to find peace in a hurricane, when you're starting out, your practice will benefit enormously from conscious preparation. The goal is just to maximize your likelihood of success. The research recommends finding a space where interruptions are unlikely, or can at least be minimized. This doesn't require total silence. It just requires predictability. It could be a specific, quiet corner of your apartment, a park bench you use during your lunch break, or a designated desk space where you always use noise-canceling headphones to signal your intention.
So it's not about finding the perfect quiet space, which might be impossible for a lot of people. It's about optimizing the conditions to allow that mental work, the gentle returning of attention, to take hold without immediate external sabotage.
That's the approach. This physical preparation supports the mental preparation. By eliminating the predictable high-frequency distractions, your phone, a colleague walking over, you make it significantly easier to practice the pillars of intention and sustained attention. Crucially, you're also signaling to your brain that this time and this specific space are reserved for the task of deep presence.
You're creating a boundary.
You're creating a boundary around your mental effort, making it a sacred, focused time.
Okay, with that foundation set, let's move from theory to the actionable tools. If someone listening is ready to begin cultivating this focus muscle, what are the 4 distinct core exercises provided in the material? The sources say each one builds a different kind of listening strength.
Right, and these exercises, they move progressively. From focusing internally on the absence of sound to externally on music, then relationally in conversation, and finally to the environmental complexity you find in nature. And the key lesson here is consistency over long duration. Starting with a commitment of just 5 to 15 minutes a day is more than enough to begin seeing neural and emotional changes.
The first exercise feels deeply counterintuitive in our culture of constant input: listening to silence. What is the fundamental purpose here?
The purpose is profound. It's to tune into the underlying quietude that exists beneath the surface noise, and by doing that, immediately calming the perpetually overstimulated mind. We are so focused on the events, the sounds, that we forget the stable container, the quiet that holds them all.
But how do we practice this? I mean, if I sit down and try to focus on silence, my brain immediately gives me tinnitus, or that internal chatter just gets louder. It seems impossible to achieve pure silence.
And that insight is crucial. You are not listening for the absence of sound. You are listening for the space of silence, or the gaps between the sounds.
Okay.
You'd begin by finding a comfortable seated position, ideally with your eyes gently closed to minimize visual input. Start with a few slow, deep breaths, and use the exhale to imagine tension releasing from your neck and shoulders. The core instruction is to focus your attention on the silence between the active sounds, the gaps.
Can you give an example of a gap?
Sure. If you're sitting in an office, notice the momentary hush after a phone rings. Or notice the tiny pause before your coworker speaks again. If you're near traffic, don't focus on the car passing, but on the second of quiet immediately following it before the next car approaches.
That connects back to the brain's addiction to stimulus.
Yeah.
By focusing on the gaps, we're denying the brain the high-frequency event it's craving.
Precisely. By focusing on the negative space of sound, we're deliberately forcing the brain to settle and attend to low-frequency data, which is highly restorative. When thoughts arise, and they will, you acknowledge them, maybe labeling them thinking, and then you gently bring your attention back to that quiet space.
Right.
And a practical tip for anyone trying this is to use a gentle timer. Set it for 7 or 10 minutes. This prevents your mind from cycling into anxiety about how much time has passed or constantly wanting to check the clock, which would completely sabotage the goal of settling the mind.
All right, exercise 2. This one sounds more enjoyable, but the methodology is very specific. What's the purpose of attentive listening to music as a focus practice?
The purpose is twofold. It sharpens your active, sustained focus, but it also allows you to appreciate the deep emotional richness of the music. It converts music consumption from just, passive background noise into a focused cognitive exercise.
What are the requirements for this to work? I'm assuming cranking up my favorite fast-paced song with complex lyrics will kind of counteract the intended effect.
That is entirely correct. The strict requirement is to select instrumental music, so ambient, jazz, classical, even complex electronic soundscapes, but specifically without lyrics.
Why no lyrics?
Lyrics immediately engage the brain's language processing centers, and that pulls your mind away from the pure, nonverbal experience of sound and into narrative analysis and verbal evaluation.
Got it.
To practice, use quality headphones for maximum immersion and sit comfortably with your eyes closed to minimize visual distraction. The core of the exercise is focused discrimination. You listen intently for individual structural elements of the music. Notice how the instruments blend. Notice when the piano enters the soundscape, or how the bass line recedes, or how the percussion creates a specific rhythm.
So instead of just being swept away by the melody, I'm focusing on the building blocks of the music itself.
Exactly. Your goal is to keep your attention pinned like a spotlight to one element, the specific rhythm of the drums, the contour of the cello line, for as long as you can. When your mind inevitably drifts to a thought or a worry, you gently return it to that specific instrument or melody line. This constant, intentional return is what rapidly builds the focus muscle.
That's a great tip.
And another simple but powerful tip is that repeatedly listening to the exact same musical selection over several days can reveal subtle, deeper layers you missed before, which strengthens your ability to sustain attention on complexity without needing novelty.
Okay, exercise 3 moves the practice into what feels like the highest stakes arena. Social application. Distraction and not listening can really injure our relationships and our professional lives. What is the goal of practicing deep dialogue?
The goal is cultivating present moment awareness and strengthening empathy in conversation. This exercise directly addresses the most common barrier to meaningful communication, which is our inherent conditioned desire to interrupt, to judge, or most destructively, to mentally formulate our own response while the other person is still speaking.
We all do that.
We all do that.
So how do we practice this socially without making our partner or friend feel like they're, a subject in some sterile behavioral experiment?
It begins with an internal, unwavering commitment. And you can even share this with your partner. The commitment is to listen fully and absolutely, not just without physically interrupting, but critically, without mentally formulating a counter-argument or a response, and without judging what's being said.
Okay.
The second step is self-observation. And this is where the neuroscience of the body comes into play.
Yeah.
You have to observe your own physical responses that are associated with the urge to interrupt. Where do you feel it?
What do you mean?
Well, it might manifest as a quick, shallow intake of breath, a tightening or clenching of your jaw, tension rising in your shoulders, or just an impulse to shift in your seat. When you feel that physical alarm system activating, you breathe deeply, intentionally soften that tension, and return your focus entirely to the speaker.
Wow, I never connected that quick intake of breath to the urge to interrupt. That's a physical alarm telling me I'm moving toward reaction, not receptive listening.
It affirms the power of the practice. It trains you out of that immediate reactivity and into calm presence. And the final, powerful step is what makes the dialogue truly deep. When it's your turn to speak, you should first reflect back what you understood before sharing your own thoughts.
To make sure you actually heard them correctly.
Yes, it confirms your attention and ensures you haven't just projected your own narrative onto their words. It shows them they were truly heard. And a great tip for this is to use supportive, confirming phrases like, "So what I'm hearing you say is," or, "Could you tell me more about that specific feeling?" to gently deepen the exchange.
And the final exercise takes us outside. In a world of synthetic noise, what is the specific purpose of engaging with nature's soundscapes for focus?
The purpose is to rekindle a sense of pure, unforced sensory focus, and often to tap into a childlike sense of wonder through natural sound. Nature provides an acoustic environment that is complex, yet inherently kind of fractal and calming. It's highly complex, but non-threatening, which allows your parasympathetic nervous system to remain active.
So how do we structure this so it moves beyond just enjoying a pleasant walk in the woods to becoming a structured focus practice?
It starts with setting a very specific intention before you even leave the house. You're going out to listen to the world, not simply to walk through it or use the time to solve a problem in your head. Take a walk in any natural setting, a park, a forest path, even a quiet garden space. Periodically, you must pause, close your eyes, and dedicate a minute or two to cataloging every single sound you can perceive. This requires effort and patience. The faint rustling of leaves, the specific sound of wind in different trees, the distant call of a specific bird, the low hum of distant machinery.
So it's about auditory discrimination, breaking the unified experience down into its discrete components?
That's the approach. You attempt to identify the distinct layers of sound. Which sounds are in the foreground, demanding attention, which are in the background, the constant hum, and which are the fleeting, momentary sounds that will disappear instantly. By focusing on these distinct layers, you resist the urge to mentally catalog or control what you hear. You just allow the natural, complex experience to unfold.
That sounds really restorative.
And a powerful tip for anyone listening. Trying this practice in different times of the day, the early morning quiet, the midday bustle, the evening insect chorus, will reveal entirely unique soundscapes and dramatically strengthen your ability to adapt your attention across varying acoustic environments.
Okay, so if we zoom out and connect all this commitment to the bigger picture, what are the tangible, long-term, transformative returns for someone who commits to this practice, even for just 5 to 15 minutes a day, consistently?
The returns are pretty profound, actually.
Let's start with the purely cognitive gains. How does this listening practice act as a mental enhancer?
Frequent intentional listening acts as a powerful mental muscle builder, particularly for the skill of selective focus. By consistently training your mind to notice a sound and gently return to it, you're strengthening the neural pathways that are dedicated to concentration and impulse control.
And what does that look like in daily life?
It translates directly into easier, more sustained concentration on complex work tasks. And critically, quicker recovery when distractions inevitably pop up. You don't spiral into frustration or lose 15 minutes trying to re-engage. You just return to the task at hand with efficient clarity.
And the emotional benefits. We spoke about non-judgment earlier. How does that translate to greater resilience?
Well, listening without judgment, whether you're receiving external feedback or just observing your own internal mental chatter, is the direct path to greater compassion for both yourself and for others. This practice dramatically reduces reactivity.
So you're less likely to snap back at someone.
You're far less prone to snapping back in a tense situation or engaging in those self-critical loops after a mistake. By cultivating patience and emotional balance, you create this internal stability that acts as a buffer against external stressors.
It makes sense that when the inner chatter quiets down, the space for new ideas opens up. What is the impact on creativity?
Oh, absolutely. Periods of deep listening intentionally create mental spaciousness by temporarily disengaging the analytical and reactive centers of the brain. When your mind isn't constantly processing, evaluating, or reacting, it allows the subconscious and associative networks to work freely. And this permits entirely new ideas to surface.
Right.
The research affirms this insight that many of the world's most innovative thinkers, they attribute their greatest breakthroughs not to these frantic, forced brainstorming sessions, but to quiet moments of contemplative listening or reflective silence. The solution to the complex problem often appears naturally when the noise, both internal and external, finally stops.
And finally, let's cover the restorative effects. Given our chronic stress epidemic, what's the physiological payoff here?
The physiological benefit is perhaps the most profound and immediate.
Yeah.
Intentional listening actively engages and activates your parasympathetic nervous system. That's the body's rest and digest, or tend and befriend mode. This action fundamentally shifts the body out of that chronic fight-or-flight stress state, the sympathetic dominance that's induced by sensory overload. By promoting this internal state of calm throughout the day, even in small bursts, you facilitate faster physical and mental recovery. And that leads to genuine, restorative rest, healthier sleep patterns, and measurable stress reduction over time.
That sounds like a blueprint for a calmer life. But we have to acknowledge the reality. The practice is fundamentally challenging. What are the common obstacles, and how do we navigate them compassionately rather than, fighting them?
Acknowledging the obstacles is the first step. It removes their power. The most common issue people face, particularly in the initial stages, is acute restlessness.
That feeling that you should be doing something productive, or that your body physically needs to move or seek new stimulus.
That's the experience. It's entirely natural, as your brain has been deeply conditioned over years, even decades, to constantly seek and consume new stimuli. The instruction here is vital.
Yeah.
You must not fight the restlessness.
So what do?
Instead, you acknowledge the feeling. You label it restlessness, you note the physical sensation, you take a deep breath, and you gently return your attention to the sounds. Fighting it just adds frustration and tension, which completely defeats the purpose.
And then there's the classic problem. The unending internal monologue, the mental chatter that just floods your mind when you try to be still.
When thoughts flood your mind, the worries, the to-do lists, the mental replaying of conversations, do not try to stop them. That's an impossible and frustrating task.
So you use the non-judgment pillar.
Exactly. You gently label the thought stream, maybe whispering internally, planning or judging or worrying, and then you compassionately return to the simple sounds around you. The key is to understand that your mind is doing its job by thinking. Your job is simply to notice it and return to the anchor. And over time, with consistency, the mental chatter will gradually quiet down.
And finally, the inevitability of technology interruptions when you're attempting to practice.
For a formal practice, you should definitely use Do Not Disturb and move your device out of sight. But if an interruption happens anyway, a sudden car alarm, a door opening, view it not as a failure of the practice, but as a compassionate, immediate cue to simply take a deep breath and begin again, without adding frustration to the moment. The power lies in the return, not in achieving some sterile, perfect environment.
Beyond the formal 5 or 15 minutes, how do we integrate these skills? How do we make them portable and applicable in the chaos of daily life?
We can integrate this mindset with 4 really powerful portable tools throughout the day. The morning reset is the most powerful starting point.
Before you check your phone.
Before you check your phone, which, as you know, immediately triggers that fight or flight response, commit to 5 minutes of listening. Listen to the sounds of your home waking up, the ambient noise outside, or just your own breathing. This sets a vital tone of presence for the entire day. It helps mitigate that urge to rush or start multitasking immediately.
It preempts the stress state before the input barrage even begins.
It absolutely does. Next, you can use workplace focus. Before a high-stakes presentation or a challenging negotiation, close your eyes briefly, even for 60 seconds, and listen to the immediate ambient sounds, the air conditioning hum, the distant voices. This simple act grounds you, helps ward off performance anxiety, and significantly boosts your clarity right when your cognitive load is highest.
We often fill our commutes entirely with consumption. How can we use the mindful commuting tool to change that?
Instead of automatically defaulting to high-input media like news or complex podcasts, try spending half your commute just listening to the environment. Whether it's the specific drone of the train tracks, the rhythm of the bus engine, the sounds of your own footsteps, you can find these surprising moments of focused calm just by attending to the acoustic environment instead of trying to fill every single moment with novel input.
And finally, using listening to ease the transition at night. Peaceful endings.
Yes. End your day by listening to the quiet sounds of the bedroom or the distant hum of life outside your window for 5 minutes. This simple practice eases the transition from a highly active brain state to restful sleep. It signals to your brain that it's time for mental closure and prevents your mind from spinning into those worry cycles right before you fall asleep.
The benefits we've discussed, calm, clarity, focus, are clearly transformative on a personal level. But the material emphasizes that this practice creates a profound ripple effect that extends far beyond the individual, impacting relationships and communities in tangible ways.
It truly does. Deep listening, particularly the relational kind, is fundamentally an act of radical generosity and complete presence.
How does this commitment to presence impact the dynamics of, say, healing relationships?
Well, when we practice genuine empathetic listening without the intent to respond, we begin to dissolve these deep-seated complaints built on a foundation of misunderstanding or feeling perpetually unheard. This creates authentic connection. People respond instinctively and positively when they feel truly attended to, rather than just tolerated while the other person waits for their turn to speak.
It builds trust.
It strengthens marriages, deepens friendships, and creates profoundly resilient professional ties.
And in the realm of leadership and influence, how does stillness translate into power?
Leaders who model stillness and listen brilliantly, rather than dominating every conversation or feeling the need to project constant certainty, they inspire immediate foundational trust and deep loyalty. By demonstrating profound respect through attention, they create safe environments where their employees or colleagues feel comfortable sharing essential, sometimes uncomfortable truths and novel, risky ideas.
So it's a different kind of strength.
Modeling focus and presence demonstrates both respect and high competence, and that leads to measurably better collective outcomes than high-volume, reactive leadership.
Zooming out even further, at the community and global level, what is the impact of a deeply listening society?
The sources describe a society that consistently values deep listening as one that naturally becomes less polarized, significantly less reactive, and ultimately far more collaborative.
That's a big claim.
It is, but when we listen with the intent to genuinely understand another perspective, rather than the intent to defeat the argument or win the rhetorical point, the political and social temperature naturally drives. Peaceful listening is described as participating in a quieter revolution, one ear and one present moment at a time. It's an essential antidote to the fast, reactive, and often cruel pace of modern digital communication.
For the listener who has mastered the basics, the 15 minutes a day, and wants to sustain this practice for life, what are the next steps? How do we continue to deepen this commitment and expand our focus capacity?
To sustain deep focus throughout a lifetime, you really do need advanced practices that are designed to profoundly recharge the nervous system. The first advanced step is seeking out extended silent retreats.
That sounds intense, but maybe necessary for a deep mental reset.
It's often essential for truly clearing the slate. You could consider attending a day-long, a weekend, or even a week-long silent retreat.
Yeah.
Many are available both in person and online now. These periods of sustained silence are incredibly effective at deeply recharging the nervous system and deepening clarity far beyond what a daily short session can achieve. It's the neurological equivalent of a total deep clean and system reboot.
Okay, what else?
The second is exploring sound meditation in a structured way. This involves guided meditations using specific tools like singing bowls, gongs, or tuned bells, or recorded natural soundscapes designed for therapeutic listening. The deep, often complex resonance of these sounds can have a profoundly calming effect on the auditory system, helping the mind settle into sustained receptive focus for much longer periods without external effort.
And finally, a mechanism for tracking and deepening that growth and insight, the listening journal.
Yes. Encourage brief, focused reflection immediately after each listening session, whether it was formal or informal. Ask yourself highly specific questions. What unique sound did I notice today that I usually filter out? How did my body feel before, during, and immediately after the practice? What emotions did the silence bring to the surface? This journaling creates a powerful, personalized record of your growth and insight. Over time, you begin to see patterns in when you feel calmest or most distracted, and that allows you to proactively tailor your environment and timing for maximum benefit.
To bring this home, let's look at some specific, expanded examples of how people in very different, high-demand contexts have successfully applied these techniques. This really illustrates the wide applicability of the practice.
We have 3 excellent examples here that showcase the sheer portability of this discipline. First, the high-stress environment of a software developer who needed sustained, non-reactive focus.
Tell us about Alex and the challenge of more focus in coding.
So Alex was wrestling with this particularly complex, insidious system bug in his code base. It was one that demanded deep, uninterrupted sequential thinking. But his mind just kept fracturing under the pressure of his tight deadline. He had hit a wall, context switching between his project and his email every few minutes.
I know that feeling.
He started a simple mindful listening practice, 5 minutes a day, sitting at his closed laptop, listening specifically to the subtle ambient sounds in his apartment. The distant traffic, the refrigerator hum. He described the moment of insight as occurring not while he was coding, but in the quiet space after his 5 minutes was up. The intense focus on the low-level hum of the environment had forced his mind to slow down and stop frantically jumping. When he returned to the screen, the entire architecture of the system appeared clear, and he saw the precise structural flaw in the code that he had been too frazzled to notice before.
Wow.
The 5 minutes of listening provided more cognitive efficiency than 2 hours of panic searching.
That's a perfect illustration of breakthrough insight born from calm. Then we have a crucial family application from a parent navigating the chaos of domestic life.
Yes, Rachel, a mother of 2 young children, described their family dinners as feeling incredibly frazzled. Rapid-fire conversation, constant interruptions, and often everyone covertly checking their phones. The atmosphere was transactional, not communicative.
So what does she do?
Rachel initiated a simple shared listening practice. Before the main course was served, they would sit in silence for 1 minute, and each person would share one specific external sound they had heard, from the dog chewing in the other room to the sound of the wind chimes. This forced a momentary synchronization and stillness. It quickly transformed dinner time from fraught to truly communicative. They began truly listening to one another's descriptions of the soundscape, which naturally led to them truly listening to one another's stories, deepening their family connection by valuing presence over input.
And finally, a high-stakes crisis example from healthcare. A nurse maintaining composure under severe pressure.
Mia, a highly skilled nurse, works in a fast-paced emergency department, an environment defined by chaos and urgency, where critical decisions have to be made instantly. She learned to use 2 minutes of intentional listening, often just focusing on the specific, quiet sound of her own breath moving through her mask, to center herself during the shift of a catastrophic patient event.
A tiny island of calm.
Exactly. This momentary grounding allowed her to maintain composure under severe cognitive and emotional pressure. More importantly, it allowed her to be fully, non-reactively present with patients and their families during critical, urgent moments. She was providing not just technical care, but crucial emotional stability during chaos.
This deep dive into peaceful listening reveals a profoundly simple yet enormously effective truth. The core takeaway really is that peaceful listening is a simple, portable, and profound gift. It deepens your presence in life, it fundamentally increases your kindness toward yourself and others by reducing judgment, and it significantly improves your overall capacity for sustained, deep focus.
And remember, the most critical advice on getting started: consistency is infinitely more important than duration. Start small, 5 minutes today, build slowly to 15. It's not about painful discipline or withdrawing from the world. It's about embracing the richness of life more fully, with a clear mind and a steady, non-reactive heart.
What's so compelling here is the potential for lifelong growth and learning that's embedded in this simple act of attention. As you truly listen to the world and yourself, you may discover that the clarity and focus you're looking for isn't out there, locked away behind some barrier of overwhelming information, but in the peaceful stillness that arises when you just pause and attend. It's in the space between sounds, the hush between thoughts, and the calm you carry forward into every task.
So we invite you to consider one final provocative thought. How might your life transform if you committed to listening, not just to respond or consume, but to genuinely understand the intrinsic structure of the sounds and the silence that surround you every single moment of the day? Use this practice as the backbone of your focus, and just watch as calm and clarity infuse every part of your experience.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. If this information helped you gain clarity and focus, please like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're going to get right to the core of, well, who you are.
Right to the heart of it.
I mean, if you've ever found yourself laughing at a joke that only works in your home dialect.
Or that feeling of nostalgia, right? When you hear a song from your childhood.
Exactly. That sudden, profound rush. You know then that language is so much more than just a tool for sending data.
It's fundamental.
Yeah, and our sources today, they really confirm that. They describe language as an invisible thread.
I like that phrasing.
It's this powerful, often subconscious force that weaves us right into our culture, our family, our communities.
So that's our focus. Our mission for this deep dive isn't just to, define a bunch of terms.
Right.
We want to explore that deep, dynamic relationship between language and identity. We'll be looking at it from all these angles: social, cultural, psychological.
And historical, too.
And historical, yeah. We're really looking for those aha moments.
Okay, so where are we finding them?
Well, they're hidden in the science of bilingualism, in the stories of endangered languages, the way digital slang just explodes out of nowhere, and in these really personal stories of self-discovery.
And loss.
And loss, absolutely. The idea is for you listening to walk away understanding that when you engage with your language, you are fundamentally changing the frame through which you see the world.
Okay, so let's unpack that before we go any further.
Yeah.
Let's talk about identity itself.
Good idea.
The sources, I think, very wisely describe it not as a single static thing, but as a mosaic.
Exactly. A mosaic. It's composed of just countless tiles, right? Your nationality, your age, your gender, your beliefs.
All the big pieces.
All the big pieces. But what's so fascinating is that language is always identified as the central tile, the load-bearing one.
Why that one specifically? What makes it so central?
Because it's the primary tool you use for everything else. It's how you label your world, how you process your thoughts even the voice you hear in your own head.
Your internal monologue.
Your internal monologue. The specific limits and structures of your language literally become the walls and the windows of your inner world.
And there's this distinction that sources make that I think we really need to focus on. It's about the questions we ask. There's a question, what are you? Which gets you a demographic answer.
Sure, I'm a 30-year-old Canadian.
Right. But then there's the much deeper question, who are you?
And that changes everything.
It does. The material stresses that the language you choose to answer that question.
Yeah.
It reflects yourself in that exact moment.
It's a performance in a way, an act of identity construction. And the influence is maybe clearest when we talk about our first language, our mother tongue.
This is where we get into linguistic relativity.
Exactly. The idea that the very structure of a language affects how its speakers see and conceptualize the world.
And this isn't just like abstract philosophy, right? It has real-world cognitive effects.
Absolutely. The language you inherit is the first lens you're given. It's the default setting for how you experience reality, and it's shaping your worldview constantly, usually without you even knowing it.
Okay, so the sources gave a really powerful example for this. A single Japanese word.
Right.
Wabi-sabi.
Wabi-sabi.
If you try to translate that into English, you can't. You end up with a whole descriptive paragraph, and you still kind of miss the feeling.
So what does it mean, or what does it point to?
It points to an aesthetic perception. It's a kind of beauty that is specifically imperfect, transient, incomplete.
Okay.
Think about the elegance of something that's been worn down by time or is slightly broken, a moss-covered stone, a tiny crack in a beautiful old wooden table. That's wabi-sabi.
So if you need a whole sentence in English like, the quiet beauty of imperfection and transience, but it's just one word in Japanese, how does that actually change someone's reality?
It changes their attentional framework. That's the key.
What do you mean by that? If you grow up with the word wabi-sabi, you have a linguistic bucket, a category, ready to go. So a native Japanese speaker is just cognitively predisposed to notice that kind of beauty.
Because they have a word for it, a shortcut.
A shortcut, exactly. They see the broken teacup and their brain immediately files it under wabi-sabi, a positive aesthetic. An English speaker might just see it as old or flawed.
So the word is like an instruction, a cultural instruction on how to look at the world, what details to value.
Precisely.
But just to be clear, this isn't saying that if I don't have the word, I literally can't see the idea.
Not at all. And that's a super important clarification. The sources are clear. Linguistic relativity is not linguistic determinism.
Okay.
It doesn't mean you can't understand the concept. It just means your language hasn't created an efficient, ready-made cognitive category for it.
It's like a filing system.
It's exactly like a filing system. The Japanese language gives you a folder labeled wabi-sabi. In English, you might have to staple a few papers together and create a new folder every time you encounter it.
And that inefficiency means you're just less likely to notice it, to savor it.
And therefore less likely to integrate it into your personal identity. It has a profound effect on what you value aesthetically and emotionally.
Wow. That's incredibly influential.
It is. And once you see how language shapes the individual, it's a very natural step to the collective level.
Moving from that internal mirror of the self to the collective mirror of the whole culture.
Right. And this is where language becomes this dense container for shared history, shared beliefs.
I find this so fascinating because this is where language really starts to encode belonging. It's not just in the words. It's in the rhythm of the stories, the specific wisdom in the proverbs, even the cadence of a festival chant.
Those things get woven into your sense of self, your relationship with your community. You don't just speak the language.
We're speaking the culture.
You are speaking the culture. A really powerful example of this from the sources is the Xhosa proverb from South Africa. Umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu.
And the literal translation is?
A person is a person through other people.
Okay, that's so much more than just a nice saying. That's a whole worldview. It's defining the self only in relation to the community.
Exactly. It's the foundational concept of Ubuntu, and it's embedded right there in the syntax of the language. It means your value, your dignity, your very humanity comes from your place within the group. The language itself is built around collectivism.
So if that's the core linguistic instruction you receive from birth, that you are defined by others, how does that actually show up in daily life?
It shows up in everything. In conflict resolution, for instance, the goal isn't just punishment for the individual.
It's about restoring the community.
It's about restorative justice, mending the social fabric. In how resources are managed, there's a priority on shared welfare, on consensus. The language is like a constant instruction manual for how to be a person in that culture.
A culture where Western-style individualism would just not compute in the same way.
It would be secondary at best. Secondary to the harmony of the group.
That gives so much context. But then, what happens when that framework moves? When people migrate?
Yeah. That's when things get really complex. Languages travel, and we get into what the sources call languages in diaspora and the creation of hybrid identities.
Because when a language travels, It's under pressure. It has to adapt.
It has to. It borrows, it blends. The context is new, the social needs are different, so you have to carve out a new linguistic space.
And the prime example here is Spanglish in the U.S.
Right. And historically, these kinds of hybrid languages have been really looked down on by purists.
Yeah, dismissed as just, bad Spanish or bad English.
A sign of laziness or a failure to properly assimilate.
But the reality is so much more complex. Spanglish is. It's a creative and active identity marker, isn't it? What makes it a real system and not just random mixing?
It is absolutely a real system. The material points out that Spanglish speakers aren't just swapping words. They're often following new, internally consistent grammatical rules, new syntactic patterns that don't belong to either Spanish or English.
So it's its own thing.
It's its own thing. A system carved out by Latin Americans to signify their cultural agility, to create a linguistic home that honors both their heritage and their lived reality in North America.
So it's a sociopolitical statement. It's saying, I exist in this hyphenated space, and my language is going to reflect that.
It's a declaration of autonomy, and we're seeing these hybrid forms become, as the sources say, badges of pride.
Right. A sign of resilience, of creating something new.
Exactly. It acknowledges that you're living between two worlds, and you're refusing to just abandon one for the other.
But there's still resistance to it, right? In more formal settings.
Oh, absolutely. The sources highlight that there's still a lot of skepticism, which forces speakers into these constant linguistic negotiations just to get by professionally.
That pressure to conform, it brings us right back to the most personal linguistic marker of all, our names.
Names are the first words we learn about ourselves, but they face so much scrutiny in new places.
And they carry so much lineage, culture, family history.
So when someone migrates, that decision to change or adapt their name, the example given is Svetlana becoming Lana, that's a huge personal negotiation.
Why is it so heavy? What's the trade-off there?
You're balancing two massive things. On one hand, you have your deep inherited cultural roots. On the other, you have the practical need for acceptance, for social ease in a new community.
So Lana is just easier, fewer corrections, less friction.
Right. It makes social integration smoother, but there's a cost. The name Svetlana might mean light or star, or it might be the name of a beloved grandmother.
And in shortening it, you're potentially sacrificing that symbolic weight, that direct link.
Exactly. So that choice, whether you're conscious of it or not, can be really empowering for some people, a deliberate choice to embrace a new self.
But for others, it could feel deeply alienating, like you've given up a piece of yourself just for convenience.
It's rarely a simple choice. The material frames it as a deep reflection of where you're anchoring your identity. Is it in the past or in the future? And what linguistic price are you willing to pay for social mobility?
And those anchors just get more and more complex when you're multilingual, constantly shifting between these worlds.
Right. So let's dive into that.
Right.
The psychological reality of being multilingual, this feeling of living between worlds.
Yeah, the sources emphasize this isn't just a metaphor. It's a real lived experience for so many people.
It is this phenomenon where bilingual people often report feeling like different people depending on the language they're using.
It's like each language is a key that unlocks a different room inside you, a room filled with specific memories, emotions, ways of relating to people.
That's a great way to put it. And it's rooted in psychology, in something researchers call language-dependent memory.
How does that work?
Well, think about it. If your most significant emotional memories, your first love, a family argument happened in your first language, trying to access those same feelings in your second language can feel distant. Muted, even.
The emotional charge isn't quite there.
It's not attached in the same way. The sources bring up the writer Eva Hoffman's memoir, Lost in Translation.
Her experience is such a powerful example of this.
It really is. She was Polish-American, and she describes how, as she started speaking English full-time, she felt like she was losing a literal part of herself.
And it wasn't the big ideas, was it? It was the small things.
Exactly. The small, intimate words, the nuances of family warmth, a little childhood joke that just doesn't translate. Losing those Polish words felt like a physical loss.
So even though she mastered English functionally,
it lacked that specific culturally loaded emotional weight. The Polish words for intimacy, for sadness, they carried history. The English equivalents felt sterile to her.
And when those words go, the identity attached to them feels threatened. She called it a diminishment.
A diminishment, yeah.
Wow. And managing these multiple selves, it must require incredible cognitive skill, which I guess brings us to code switching.
The art of adaptation. And it is so much more sophisticated than just, knowing when to speak English at the store.
Right. It's switching languages, dialects, even accents, sometimes within the same conversation.
Or even the same sentence.
So what's driving that? Why do people do it?
Well, it serves this complex dual function. Sometimes, yes, it's practical. You switch so everyone understands.
Okay, that makes sense.
But more often, and this is the fascinating part, it's subconscious. It's about signaling social identity.
Signaling? How so?
You might switch to your heritage language with one person in the room to signal intimacy or in-group solidarity. Then you switch right back to the dominant language to signal formality or professional distance to someone else.
It's a linguistic dance. You're constantly adjusting your position.
A masterful, instantaneous dance. And importantly, this isn't just about switching between, say, Spanish and English. The sources are clear. It also applies to accents and dialects.
Within the same language.
Within the same language, absolutely. Yeah. Think about the mental energy it takes. You might carefully control your accent to sound more professional during a big presentation at work.
That's a form of code switching.
It's absolutely code switching. You're signaling competence by conforming to what's perceived as a high-status norm. But the second you walk out of that meeting and call your family,
you switch right back.
You switch back to your home dialect, a more relaxed, intimate way of speaking. And that switch signals comfort, belonging, moving from one social identity to another. It's an incredible, often unconscious skill.
It sounds like a constant, invisible performance. And while that flexibility is obviously a huge asset, the sources say it can also be a double-edged sword.
For sure. It can create really significant, often unfair challenges, especially for immigrant families.
You're talking about children having to act as translators for their parents.
Exactly. The kids pick up the new language quickly, and suddenly they're translating in critical situations. Medical appointments, legal documents, parent-teacher conferences.
And on one hand, that must bring a sense of pride.
Immense pride, responsibility, maturity. But it's also a profound pressure. You have a 10-year-old bearing adult responsibility in a language they might only just be mastering themselves. It forces a kind of premature adulthood.
And then there's the other side of that coin. The loss of the heritage language.
The assimilation pressure is so intense that kids might stop using their parents' language to fit in, and that creates these deep, painful generational rifts.
The linguistic bridge just collapses.
It collapses. And with it, the easy transfer of cultural memories, of family history, of certain emotional concepts. The kids feel a void, and the parents feel a sense of failure, even though it was driven by necessity.
Let's make this more tangible. The sources gave a few specific stories. Let's start with Sarah, who moved from Korea to Canada.
Sarah's story is a perfect illustration of this in-between identity. In Korea, she was outgoing, funny, confident.
And in Canada?
Her hesitant, accented English suddenly made her feel like her personality was trapped, masked. She had to pour all her energy into mastering English for school, for social survival.
But at home, Korean was still the language of family, of emotion.
Exactly. So as an adult, she feels permanently in between, not 100% at home in either linguistic world. But the sources point out that this complexity makes her identity richer, not poorer. She has access to two whole frameworks for life.
That feeling of being a different person in each language. Then there's Omar's story, which is about reclamation, not assimilation.
A totally different path. His family had been disconnected from their homeland for generations, so he grew up without his ancestral language.
And he decided to learn Arabic as a teenager.
He did. And for him, it wasn't about daily communication. It was a conscious effort to reconnect with a history he'd never seen. The sources say each new word he learned was a claim to a story and heritage nearly lost.
So learning the language was an act of repair.
A therapeutic act of personal and historical repair.
Yes. And finally, there's this really intimate example of the desire to belong through language. Cryptophagia.
The secret languages of twins. It's fascinating. It shows this fundamental primal impulse to forge a linguistic identity.
So they invent their own language.
Yeah, often a mix of sounds they hear from adults and their own inventions. It rarely lasts into adulthood, but its existence proves that identity isn't just about big cultures. It's about intimacy, creating a language that only two people in the world share.
The ultimate in-group.
The ultimate in-group. It's a tool for radical belonging at the smallest possible scale.
That brings us to a more serious and somber part of the discussion. Language loss, shame, and the politics that drive all of it. When you look at the world's linguistic diversity, the numbers are just They're staggering.
And terrifying. We're talking over 7,000 languages spoken worldwide.
Not the threat.
The threat is that nearly half of them could be gone by the end of this century. Gone.
Wow.
The sources mention UNESCO's Atlas of the World's Languages in Danger. It's this grim record because for so many of these languages, there are only a handful of elderly speakers left.
When a language dies, we're not just losing words.
Oh, not at all. We lose an entire worldview, a unique piece of history. We lose centuries of accumulated indigenous knowledge about, medicinal plants or navigation by the stars. Knowledge encoded only in that language.
It's an irreplaceable loss of a specific way of being human.
It is, and that loss is also felt so acutely on the personal level. The sources talk a lot about the pain of language loss and how it often comes out as shame or displacement.
You see it with kids who get bullied for their accent, so they just stop speaking their parents' language as a survival tactic.
But it's heartbreaking. Or adults who immigrate and feel permanently cut off from opportunities because they never quite master the new language.
And you said this pain is intergenerational.
It is. It becomes a cycle.
Right.
The parents regret not passing it on, feeling they failed their children. And then the children mourn this thing that was never really theirs, feeling like a part of their own history is missing.
It creates a chasm between them.
A deep emotional chasm, yeah.
But the story isn't all loss. The sources were also really inspiring when they talked about reviving lost voices.
Yes. These are acts of resistance, acts of self-determination. They show the absolute bond between language, pride, and reclaiming your identity.
And there are these incredible, successful movements happening. The example of the Maori language in New Zealand was powerful.
Very powerful. And the key to their success is the kahanga reo.
The language nests.
Language nests. They're total immersion preschools. The elders speak Maori exclusively to the youngest children.
So you're creating a natural environment for the language to be passed down?
You're rebuilding it from the ground up. You're making it a living, breathing part of daily life again, not just a history lesson.
And we see a similar thing with the Hawaiian language schools.
Same model. It's not just about grammar. It's about creating a new generation of proud, fluent speakers who are actively asserting their cultural dignity against decades of attempted erasure.
It's a political act, then. A form of resistance.
It is absolutely a potent form of resistance. When you reclaim your heritage language, you're not just getting vocabulary back. You're getting songs, rituals, ways of thinking. You're re-anchoring yourself in your own history.
And what about on a smaller scale? For individuals?
We're seeing more and more of it. Adults enrolling in heritage language classes, people recording their grandparents' voices to create archives, using apps like Duolingo.
And that's not just about becoming fluent.
Not at all. It's symbolic. It's about repairing those broken links to family, to history, and to yourself. Finding one lost word, being able to recite one forgotten prayer. That is an assertion that your story matters, that your identity can still be claimed.
Okay, so we have to shift from these internal dynamics to the external forces. Language is power and discrimination.
A critical piece of the puzzle. Because who decides what language is spoken in the courthouse or the university or the boardroom? That is a fundamental exercise of power.
And those policies, things like English-only laws.
Or, on the other side, minority language quotas in broadcasting. They have a massive impact on who gets opportunities, who gets to be part of the public conversation.
So speaking the right language or the prestige dialect unlocks doors?
And speaking a minority language or a non-standard dialect can lock them. It can stigmatize you, exclude you, and reinforce a social hierarchy.
Which leads right into linguistic discrimination, profiling.
This is when people are judged subtly or overtly, just based on how they speak, their accent, their dialect.
In a job interview or even on a customer service call.
Exactly. Your accent becomes a social marker, and it triggers all these deep-seated biases about your intelligence, your capability, your trustworthiness.
And this is such an insidious form of prejudice because it's so rarely called out on the same level as, say, racial bias.
Right. It disguises itself as a judgment on communication skills. It puts all the burden on the speaker to assimilate instead of on the listener to check their bias.
But there is pushback.
A lot of pushback. We're seeing movements for accent pride, a celebration of dialect writers.
The sources mentioned Zora Neale Hurston.
A perfect example. She was a major figure in the Harlem Renaissance.
And her use of African-American vernacular English in her novels was a revolutionary act.
It was, because she refused to sanitize it. She refused to make it conform to the white middle-class literary norms of the time.
So by putting AAVE, which had been dismissed as deficient, right into the heart of high literature.
She was asserting its validity, its complexity, its beauty. She was saying this is a legitimate marker of cultural identity and narrative power.
It's a collective assertion that all language is valid.
It's it. It's a challenge to the idea that there's only one correct way to speak. So to wrap things up, we have to look at the present and the future. Let's pivot to technology and how it's just accelerating all of this.
Right. The digital frontier. It has completely changed how we use language. Speed, efficiency, and the spontaneous creation of digital slang.
And these slang terms function as in-group identity markers.
Absolutely. Think about emojis, memes, hashtags. These are not just silly decorations on our text.
No, they're complex communication tools. They signal that you belong, that you're digitally fluent. They mark generational shifts.
You can communicate a really complex emotional state with a single meme that an outsider just wouldn't get.
Exactly. And if you use a word like stan as a verb,
I stan this band.
you're immediately signaling that you're part of a very specific modern online fandom. It's a linguistic shortcut to prove you're an insider.
And the life cycle of this language is so fast.
Incredibly fast. Traditional linguistic change took generations. Now a word can be born on TikTok, go global in 6 months, and be considered cringe a year later.
So our linguistic identity online is more fluid, more disposable than ever.
It is, which leads to what the sources call microlanguages within specific online communities.
Like on Reddit or Discord.
Yeah, specific subreddits or servers. They develop their own insider jokes, their own codes, their own slang that is basically impenetrable to outsiders.
It's like cryptophagia, but on a huge scale.
A perfect comparison. You have to learn a new, rapidly changing dialect just to join the conversation.
And that's vital for identity, because that anonymity lets you experiment.
It does. You can try on a different persona, a different kind of humor, a different way of presenting yourself without the immediate real-world consequences. The language is a low-stakes costume.
I like that, a linguistic costume. But this technological landscape, it also has its limits. The sources bring up AI translation.
Right. Tools like Google Translate are breaking down barriers, which is great, but they're also flattening language.
Flattening it. What do we lose when an AI translates for us?
We lose the paralinguistic elements, the things that carry the real identity.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
An AI can give you the dictionary definition of the words, the factual content. But so much of our identity is communicated not in what we say, but how we say it.
The rhythm, the inflection, the tone of voice.
The cultural references, the humor, the sarcasm, all the things that a machine struggles to capture. AI can give you the meaning, but it strips away the identity.
It can't give you the emotional history of a word in a specific context.
Precisely. And finally, we have to touch on how language is reflecting and driving huge changes in gender and linguistic identity.
One of the most active debates in linguistics right now.
For sure. You have all these traditional languages, French, Spanish, Arabic, that are grammatically gendered. Nouns are masculine or feminine.
And that binary structure is now clashing with our modern understanding of non-traditional gender identities.
It's a direct conflict. And the debates around gender-neutral pronouns are all about carving out a linguistic space for people who don't fit into that old binary.
So, in Spanish, for example.
The sources detail the move away from using the masculine plural, like Latinos, to refer to a mixed group. People are introducing alternatives like Latin or Latinx.
And that's a real battle, isn't it?
It's a battle between how people are speaking and how authorities say they should speak. It's a social struggle to invent new structures that affirm identity and demand recognition.
So creating neopronouns like Zahir, or adapting old words.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental assertion of I exist.
It's an act of survival and recognition. And it goes beyond grammar. It's also in the voice itself.
How so?
The sources note how trans and non-binary individuals often actively work to modify their speech, their pitch, their tone, their word choice, to align their voice with their felt gender identity.
Which proves that your voice isn't just a biological thing.
It's also cultural, it's adaptable, it's a chosen critical part of your expressed identity.
Wow. This entire deep dive has just been such a layered look at how language and the self are completely intertwined, from a single word for a teacup to the political power of an accent. So bringing this all back to you, the listener, I think we have to just reaffirm the fluid nature of identity.
Absolutely. As the world globalizes, as we connect across borders, as technology speeds everything up, our identities are just becoming more and more layered, more complex.
There's no one perfect way to honor your roots.
No.
No single language of identity.
None. The immigrant, the bilingual speaker, the online creator, the language revivalist, everyone is navigating this fluidity, constantly remixing their linguistic self.
Which brings us to, I think, the final core concept that ties all of this together.
That language is a practice, not a possession.
That distinction is so important.
It's vital. Language isn't some dusty artifact you inherit. It's something you actively do. You use it, you adapt it, you choose it, you invent it every single day.
Your identity is affirmed in the action of speaking.
In the action. What matters is its function in shaping and maintaining who you are and where you belong. It's the instrument you use to tell your own story.
So as we wrap this up, what is the ultimate value of this living, breathing thing we call language?
It is the single most comprehensive living record that humanity has.
The living record.
It preserves not just facts, but entire ways of being. It's deeply personal, it holds your most intimate memories, and it's profoundly collective. It anchors you to a history and a community that can stretch back thousands of years. To speak is to participate in history itself.
So here's the final thought we want to leave you with. By honoring the languages that make up who you are, and that could be anything. It could be translating a poem from your grandparents' language,
Learning a lullaby you never got to hear.
joking around in some niche online dialect, or even just consciously changing your accent for a meeting.
In all of those acts, you are not just communicating. You are actively, deliberately crafting your story in words. You are ensuring that your own identity remains as vibrant, as hybrid, and as evolving as the languages we're all so lucky to speak.